Henry, with all the budget cuts that are going on, and government agencies are slashing everything, an information that we got, and it's of great concern to us, is that at the state level, it appears that those budget cuts are having a detrimental effect on the maintenance of state aviation departments with qualified people, and that aviation-related oversight is being assigned to people who don't have that resident knowledge and who really don't care about it. It's like an additional duty that the department got assigned, and they really aren't passionate the way the state aviation departments are. How is that shaping out, and what do you see for that in the future?
It is of current concern for all of us. Thank you for bringing that up, Matt. You know, all of us have been facing decreasing budgets. In some cases, the meat axe that we've seen with sequestration has taken place in some of the states. We've all seen elections recently where a gubernatorial candidate has campaigned on elect me and I'll sell our airplanes. You know, that's, for anybody who is an aviation professional, anybody who's an aviation advocate, that's insanity. So we are facing a lot of difficulties in those areas. We have people who are, now, as with sequestration, as with the federal government, if you look at what's happening in some of the states, you're seeing budget cuts, you're seeing staff attrition, you're seeing folks not getting replaced when they retire or move on. However, the good news is that in most cases, you do have a person there in the state capitol who does understand aviation, who does understand especially general aviation, and it remains an advocate and is doing all he or she can to promote that role within the state, as I said earlier, serve the public interest in aviation within that state. And there's a lot of diverse work that's going on that you would not imagine. Now, you all know about the travel bans. Most states currently do not permit their state employees to venture outside their state borders on most types of business. When it comes to our aviation world, very often the state aviation director, who is appointed by or serves at the pleasure of the governor, must get approval from the governor's office to make that trip outside the state borders, because the constituents will want to know how that taxpayer money is being spent. Now, of course, I agree completely that we have to be totally transparent on how that taxpayer money is being spent. It has to be spent fairly, but it must also be spent adequately on the jobs that we have been trained to do, the jobs that are within the descriptions of what we do for our constituents, in that case within the states, but across the U.S. as well. One of the things, let me play off something Tom was saying, there was a telecon yesterday involving the shutting down of the contract control towers across the country. I was in an airplane at the time, so I couldn't be on the telecon. Tommy Booth, NASEO's chairman this year from the great state of Mississippi, was on that telecon for NASEO, and he was joined by our vice chairman, Chris Willenborg of Massachusetts, and they talked about shutting down all of the contract control towers because those are the ones in the current scheme of things that FAA sees as having the smallest effect on the traveling public. That will have a major effect on all of us because those are primarily general aviation airports that are losing those contract control towers. And so we've made a very important a foray into FAA saying, you know, we really need to talk about this more. I think it's more than the blunt meat axe approach. We need to talk about whether or not this tower is going to be shut down and why, because that tower may be very important to business and industry within this community. That tower may be very important to the military in that state. That tower may be very important to commercial aviation in a rural state. So we need to keep those activities open. One of the things that I wanted to mention also that the states were active in long before we had sequestration, long before we, wasn't that nice before we faced today's problems? You know, every day just gets a little weirder, doesn't it? But one of the things we were concerned about within the states is the fact that if you look at the NIPIAS, by the way, there are some faults with the NIPIAS document, the National Integrated Plan of Airports. But there's no other nation in the world that has a program, a plan to bring all of our airports into the same plan. And every state, by the way, as you know, has a systems plan, an aviation systems plan. Our airports are integrated from the smallest to the largest. And it's important for us when we're talking to our friends in the federal government, remember this airport that has a contract tower that may not have a lot of operations is important to somebody. It's important to some constituents because it is in the NIPIAS. And when you look at the NIPIAS, the National Integrated Plan of Airports, you have for our larger airports, large hubs, small hubs, reliever airports, et cetera. But when it comes to general aviation, that's all it is, one title, general aviation. So several years ago, the states began working with FAA to say, you know, we need to classify our general aviation airports better because we were getting criticized by some members. By the way, let me just say, the men on this panel have done a fantastic job in building the GA coalition in the House and in the Senate. Those caucuses are strong, as was said earlier. Very important to us. But there are some members of the House and Senate who are not members of the GA caucus, and they were saying, why are we funding this general aviation airport? Usually not in their home state, by the way. And then you have some publications that do not believe in the NIPIAS, who do not believe that all Americans deserve access to our aerial transportation system. And so we thought in NASAO that we have to prove to the media and to certain members of Congress that these airports have a value. And so we began working on the asset program, the program that has now classified general aviation airports, which prior to sequestration, we thought would be very helpful in getting funding to those airports from both state and federal governments. So there's a lot going on there that we can talk about if you're interested when you have questions later. But that's some of what NASAO's involved in. But again, those budget cuts, whether federal or state, we've got to watch those very closely. You know, NASAO probably has the smallest staff of any of the organizations here on stage. In fact, you're looking at exactly 1/3 of the entire mighty NASAO staff this morning.
There you go.
But I'd lost a person recently. And that old adage, do more with less, is baloney. You do less with less. And with that, I'll move on.
You're a small group, but you're a mighty force.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Merci, monsieur.
Well, that's great. I think we've covered quite a number of things, and what I'd like to do is open it up to the floor for questions. And if I can get one of the staff, we have a wireless out there, and we can get, so we can hear the question, because we can't see you with the lights. And we want to make sure we do get the questions. And if you do ask a question, could you just direct it at someone in particular, if that's what you want, or if it's a general question just to us, we'll kind of grab it as we can. So, questions out there? Comments? And I can't see, so. Chris, do you have a mic, or if anybody has a question? Okay, here we go.
Good morning, gentlemen. Jack Cummins, representing Alpha Global Exchange. Appreciate the information you imparted. The question I have is a little bit off that primary subject, in that with the economic climate here in the United States, being that general aviation as a whole, no matter fixed wing, helo, anything else, doing things nationally as well as internationally, what have the various associations, or have you looked at the ramifications of Dodd-Frank or Basel III, especially on the international business and how it's strangling international commerce?
All right.
I'll just start. When you look at the international banking regulations, and this is all a reaction, or to some extent, when you talk to the bankers, some of it's an overreaction to what happened at the end of 2008. As we all know, financing for aircraft sales is totally different than it used to be. Now, if you're on the commercial side of the business, basically, we've had a lot of friends in different meetings that we've been at that work with the airlines, and they basically say the day they buy a new new Boeing or Airbus or Embraer or Bombardier aircraft, it actually is paying for itself because they can get cheap money. I mean, money is very, very cheap if you can get it in this day and age. But when you get to general aviation, civil aviation aircraft in our market space, whether it's fixed wing or rotorcraft, the dynamic's totally different. And because of the way the banking regulations categorize the asset, we cannot get lending in the terms anywhere close to what we had pre the end of 2008. And this has caused a very interesting dynamic. And as you know, quite frankly, we all know this is not a surprise that there was a lot of speculation in the marketplace for aircraft prior to 2008, especially on the fixed wing side. It was almost like homes. People were buying, flipping positions, backlogs were giant. That doesn't exist anymore. So when the asset value now is not inflated any longer, and you have a large number of used aircraft out on the market, that puts further perturbations in there. So getting money is tough. There are some innovative approaches that some of the associations working with bankers are working on, but also we're looking at the importance. One of the things for XM financing overseas for the manufacturers is quite important. Our rotorcraft manufacturers use that, but also rotorcraft manufacturers whose state of design is in a different country also use their funding mechanisms within their own federal governments to be able to sell into their other markets. Because right now government funding is very important, and that's one of the reasons why we had a challenge with the U.S. Congress last year in trying to make them understand that XM financing, one, makes money for the U.S. government, and two, it's not just for Mother Boeing. It impacts all of us. And I mentioned earlier that ag aircraft were a good part of growth this last year. They're using XM financing quite a bit. So that is one avenue that we're using more and more. But to answer your question specifically, Basel II implementation and then Basel III is extremely complex and onerous for the banks. And what the banks have told us is this lends itself to the development of different financing mechanisms and different thoughts about how you finance aircraft that are outside of the normal bank structure that comes under that type of regulation. And we're starting to see the beginning development of that out there right now. And it's very important for any of us that want to finance aircraft, whether it's buying used, burning off that used inventory, or buying new.
Well, if I may, as an HAI member, and posit to you that not only in that arena, but for suppliers, manufacturers who are doing business internationally and have to send or receive payments to include third party, which Dodd-Frank is strangling at the moment, Alpha Global, through a non-bank alternative, in still complete international regulatory compliance, can assist these businesses with their international payments or receipts with no transfer fees, no compliance fees, no wire fees, at no cost to the business, getting interbank Fortune 100 rights. So if anybody is interested, we can certainly provide information to the associations, get it out to your members, because there's a paradigm shift in the foreign currency markets. And as a workaround through entrepreneurial spirit, a FINRA regulated, SEC registered, all can be done through the non-banking alternative. And we're headquartered out of the Chicago Board of Trade, so everything's on square, but this is an avenue that's coming, but we're on the forefront of it. But the general aviation industry can certainly take advantage of it because there is so much international business and foreign exchange take place. So I just wanted to make that aware that if it's not being looked into, it needs to be, because as Dodd-Frank fully becomes implemented, and as well Basel III with regard to the international side, it's going to strangle international commerce, and which is going to just put more pressure on the businesses here in the United States.
Okay. I can tell you from HAI standpoint, we're focusing on that, and we're working through our Business Financial Committee and our Finance and Leasing Committee. And the other kind of flip side of our concern about available money is on the student side of people coming in that want to be pilots and maintenance people. The quick example is our concern is that a young person today that wants to become a helicopter pilot is looking right in the eye of about an $80,000 debt, and they can't get that money to start that training. And that's preventing probably hundreds, if not thousands of people who want to take the training, are willing to make the commitment, but there's no money available to them to finance their flight training.
Well, we can certainly assist in creating an avenue to build up the scholarship funds to help bring people
We
into
have
those
scholarships,
areas.
obviously.
Right, but I mean
And we
in
put the scholarships out there.
Right.
We're trying to work it from all ends. One of the ends we try to work it from, quite frankly, is the ability for the industry to really consider the major operators who need these people and the stakeholders of the manufacturers. Is there a potential to have that stakeholding group develop a finance source to support direct financing of people like that want to come into the industry? And that's a conversation that has taken place, because if we don't close this gap, we're just going to cut off our supply of the next generation, and we're not going to be able to operate. I mean, it's that blunt, you know. So yeah, we're looking at every angle possible, you know.
Well, thank you. And again, appreciate all the information today. If there's anything we can do to assist, we're more than happy.
Okay, good point. Another question, or?
You know, Matt, one of the
Yeah.
things that I think comes up when you talk about financing that has been a real challenge for our industry since kind of the fall off in 2008, and the trends are moving in the right direction, but the fact that the inventory of airplanes for sale and the fact that the value of used airplanes has been going down has created a significant issue for finding financing.
True.
You know, fortunately, that's going in the right direction, but I don't think, you know, our industry's been around for a long time. We've been through a lot of economic ups and downs. And you always say, well, is this just one more or is this something different? I'm not sure we've ever had a situation where we have had such an inventory of used airplanes and seen prices of used airplanes come down quite so far for quite so long. And I think that has made a lot of the lenders a little bit uneasy about, well, what is the overall value of the asset that I'm providing lending for? So financing is tough. We hear it all the time, and it's certainly nowhere near the terms that people were finding in 2007, 2008. And there may be a variety of reasons for that, but I do think the size of the used inventory is something that is a little bit new and different.
Yeah, good point.
Man, I wanted to just touch on something that you talked about earlier, and that's the FAA's primacy over the airspace. When you emphasize, you know, the Senator Schumer bill that basically forced the FAA to do something that I don't think they would have done otherwise, and now we're seeing this initiative in California, which is just mind-boggling, as you said to me, where you've got a manufacturer in Torrance, California, and right around that, they're producing legislation to take care of a noise problem when this manufacturer employs so many of the people that live in that community. It's just unbelievable that they're thinking this way. But we all signed on, all our associations signed on to a letter to the FAA administrator saying that you have to enforce your authority over the airspace, because we're finding it in different patchworks all over the country. You take, there's some preserves, nature preserves, wildlife preserves that NOAA has responsibility for, that I know Craig hears about all the time, that if you violate that airspace, you can get a really hefty fine. And then we have the National Park Service that was trying to get primacy over the airspace over their areas. And if we create a patchwork in this country that's built like that, it is a bad, bad downward trend for all of us. And we've seen this in Europe. So this noise legislation that is going forward, we need to all collectively pay attention to it, because it's going to hit every facet. And then that brings into the next big thing that's facing all of us, and that is the explosion of unmanned aerial vehicles into the airspace. If you look at the report that we saw 2 days ago with the Alitalia thinking that they saw a UAS going into the airspace, I have no doubt that those pilots knew exactly what they saw. The FAA is investigating it. That is the tip of the iceberg. And I will predict, you know, we do not test aircraft engines and canopies, whether they're rotorcraft or fixed wing, to a 25-pound piece of metal. We test it to a bird, small bird that's going to disintegrate. We will bring down an aircraft, and where the first COAs, these agreements that the FAA is allowing for local law enforcement, that they're happening in cities where we have a lot of rotorcraft operations. And I am very concerned about this. We have technology that should be able to identify where at least these things that you can't see with your eyeballs might be out there. But we've got to be able to figure out, one, that the UASs are required to have technology on board, that we have an enhancement capability so that we can see them, but we've also got to be able to have the operator communities fully integrated into what the FAA's thinking is, and that we have great respect for Administrator Werther, but I think there's one area that I have not been satisfied with, and that is the cooperative nature of the folks that are developing the unmanned aerial vehicle plan within the FAA, of working with the manned aircraft stakeholders, whether it's on the airline side or whether it's on our side, to be able to say, does this make sense, what you're doing? And that's really a call that we've got to have a better dialogue.
Excellent point. Yeah, helicopters are obviously right in the middle of the UAV's operating area, and we're going to be affected the most, so it is a critical issue. So, any more questions? You just step up to the mic, and we're coming to the conclusion. We got about 10 minutes, so we'd love to have you give us your input. No? Okay, well, I guess I'll take that as a good job that we did.
Sounds good.
All righty. Well, I really want to thank the people that joined me here, and they've traveled quite a distance to be at the show and participate in the panel, and I think it was very informative, and I hope both you here and the people on the internet that are viewing got some new information and made you a little more effective in operating out there. And I think you know how to get in touch with any of us. We're pretty well publicized on emails, and we love to hear your thoughts on things. And again, the good news is we're working together. We're sharing everything, and we're about as effective as we can be, which is a good thing for the members. So with that, thanks a lot. And we have the next forum in here. If you're interested, it'll be public aircraft operations, and that'll take place at 3 o'clock. Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it, and thank you for being here.